All right, let's try this again. Hey there, welcome to The Great Pause. I'm Jennifer Jolly.
And I'm David Take Two Perry. Ahoy. Believe it or not, it's been 62 days since California Governor Newsom issued the shelter-in-place directive, and for those of us living in San Francisco, even longer under the protocols from Mayor Breed. But thanks to this incredible, unprecedented group effort, we have squashed the curve, flattened the curve, and saved lives in San Francisco and all over the Bay Area.
That's right. And we have a fantastic show lined up for you today with a really special focus on arts and entertainment. I mean, when will our beloved restaurants, bars, theaters, and music halls reopen? Well, you're about to find out. San Francisco, as you know, is famous for its restaurants and food trends. It's as famous for those as it is for the Golden Gate Bridge, the cable cars, and, well, .com everythings. There is something to see everywhere you turn. Colorful neighborhoods, rich history, diverse culture, and at the very heart of it all, arts, music, dance, theater, clubs, cabarets, all of which right now are totally shut down. So today we'll give you an insider's view on all the efforts to reopen and shine a spotlight on the people, places, and arts that make San Francisco so incredibly special.
You know, and before we do that, Jen, let's get a COVID-19 update, because now something very important has happened and is happening in San Francisco. Anyone in the city who wants to get a COVID test, especially those who have to leave home to work, can sign up for that test for free. There are 3 city locations, one south of Marke in Soma, one on the Embarcadero, and a new pop-up site in the Tenderloin. So to schedule an appointment, go to sf.gov/get tested. Remember, sf.gov/get tested SF for your free COVID-19 test.
David, have you had a COVID-19 test yet?
I have not. It's interesting that you asked that. My husband Alfredo and I are about to have our annual checkup, and we had gotten our blood tested for our cholesterol, which is the only issue we have at the moment. But we are thinking about going back and getting that. Alfredo was very, very sick in January with all the classic symptoms of COVID-19, and we're curious. So we haven't gotten it yet, but I think we just might.
Yeah, same with our family over here. We think my 19-year-old probably had coronavirus in late February, early March. So we're anxious to get tested as a family for the antibodies. But yeah, that is kind of what everyone's talking about now. As various sources have reported, we have more than 38 million Americans unemployed, out of work, just since this pandemic struck. And just under half of all American households, that's nearly 50% of us, have experienced some loss of income. So how does that impact the unique and varied entertainment industry here in San Francisco? Well, David comes right back with our first interview with more.
Thanks so much, Jen. You know, every business, every person in the world, in the Bay Area, of course, has been impacted by COVID-19. And people keep talking about essential businesses. Well, of course, we in San Francisco and Northern California know that the arts are part of what is essentially San Francisco about us. So to talk about how COVID-19 has impacted and will continue to impact the arts community, we continue our discussion today with Brad Erickson, Executive Director of Theater Bay Area. Brad, welcome to The Great Pause.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
So before we begin, why don't you tell us, how have you been dealing with, as we call it, the great pause? How have you been getting by personally? And then we'll get into professional.
Well, I think probably the biggest difference for me has been working from home rather than going into the office. I get down there once a week, pick up some checks, pick up some bills, and then come back to my house. And it's a very strange thing I live in the Excelsior, so to ride through the city on my bicycle, empty streets, get down to the Civic Center area, almost no one's there, go into an empty office. It does appear the janitor is arriving once a week to empty empty the recycling and what little I leave behind, and then it's just so empty and so strange to see the city in this way, and to learn how to work from home. Learn how to keep a staff connected. We're doing that through daily calls with each other. We're working a lot on Zoom, staying connected with folks, but it's a very world, it seems, at the moment.
Well, of course, one of the other places that is empty here in San Francisco are our area stages. Talk to me, what is it like right now in this moment for the theater community in San Francisco and the Bay Area? And when are we going to get back on stage with our actors and performers and directors?
Well, it's really difficult. It's difficult for everyone. It's difficult for the largest companies, for ACT and Berkeley Rep, and for the Curran, for SF Broadway. It's difficult for the tiniest companies, and it's difficult, of course, for artists and folks who are working in the theater, and the same is true for the music world and dance as well. So no one is selling any tickets, clearly, right? We were hoping maybe at the beginning of this that we would be able to, in September or maybe October, most of a regular. Now we're thinking that probably the best bet is more like January, and maybe not even until April. And that is posing some really, really difficult challenges for our companies to deal with not having any ticket sales for what could be an entire year. And what does that mean for workers who are out of work, who are thrown out of work quite unexpectedly, trying to find ways to keep food on the table and a roof over their head? And that's sort of where we are at Theater Bay Area. We saw this very early on. Folks in the community, Eric Ting at Cal Shakes and others, were reaching out and saying, is there something we can do for these workers who suddenly don't have jobs and suddenly aren't going to have an income that they were expecting? And I have to say, it's been amazing. We set up something called the Performing Arts Workers Relief Fund in conjunction with our sister organizations, Dancers Group and Intermusic SF. And in the last 2 months, we've been able to raise $250,000. We've already granted out over $200,000 to 250 plus workers who are in desperate need. And I'll say this, that we still have 400 applications that we haven't been able to get to yet, and more applications are coming in every day. So on the one hand, it's been gratifying to be able to help people, and the stories are really heartrending. It's also, the fund is still open, and we are still gladly accepting contributions because we receive contributions every day, but we receive even more applications every day from these workers who are needing some help right now.
Hearing you talk about the direct assistance for actors reminds me of during the worst of the AIDS HIV years, a board that I was on, Visual Aid, a nonprofit, existed specifically to get direct assistance to working artists, because one of our founders made the observation one day that one of our artists had to choose that day between getting paint supplies or paying for his AZT. So what you're doing is like that. You're giving direct assistance to actors. This isn't going to companies in the Bay Area.
That's right.
I mean, to theater companies.
This is going to individual, and we've called it workers because, yes, actors, but it's also stage managers. It's people who work backstage. We've had folks who are ushers at the Curran and SF Broadway. Those are real jobs who, of course, they don't have work either if the house isn't open. So we wanted to make it open to workers of all kinds and from all this of music and dance as well. So music, dance, theater. The awards have gone out about evenly to those three different disciplines. And again, performers, but also folks backstage, folks in the box office, folks who are working the front of house. Anybody who has been thrown out of work because of the cancellation of these productions is welcome to apply, and we're receiving more applications every day.
This is just devastating to hear that you may not have performances on stage until April. I mean, because, having gone to school in theater, I know that when I was an actor, I didn't get paid to be an actor. I had to wait tables. Well, if you're an actor, singer, whatever, and a waiter, all of your income is gone. I mean, are we looking at an industry that is being devastated even more than what we're hearing about in retail and other small business here in San Francisco? I mean, April just sounds untenable.
It's pretty horrendous. I mean, I think at the moment, our our folks are, are very badly hit. We know that others are as well. Waiters are out of work and cooks are out of work and lots of folks are out of work. We are not saying that we're suffering more than others, but we may suffer longer than others. The governor has put out the different stages that he wants to reopen the state, and quite honestly, gathering in large groups, live and in person, is in that the final stage, stage 4. Restaurants will open significantly earlier. So you're absolutely right. It's very difficult for our companies, and it's really difficult for the workers. And I know that company leaders, we meet regularly once a week to talk about what's happening. We compare notes, we compare sort of projections on what we're thinking, and it's very difficult. I mean, some folks are having to say, I don't know, I can't pay rent. I'm just gonna not pay. I can't pay the rent and have any staff. And so they're hoping for the best with their landlords. It's a very difficult situation for everyone. And the longer this goes on and the longer we're not able to reassemble, the deeper those cuts will be. And you're absolutely right to say that many times in the arts, arts workers do augment their income as a waiter or in the service industry. I know I did. I used to work at Zuni Cafe, and Zuni is closed along with all the rest of the restaurants. So yeah, it's very difficult for both workers and companies. And one of the things that Theater Bay Area is doing to help is we're engaging in a study that's being led by the researchers at Wolf Brown. This is actually an international study. We're partnering with other service organizations across the country to look at the changing attitudes of audiences over time around coming back, right? When will they feel comfortable coming back into a theater, coming back into a concert hall? What will the conditions need to be for them to feel safe enough to buy a ticket? And those attitudes are changing over time. So we're assembling a cohort here in the Bay Area of 20 organizations. We've got groups from the ballet to Berkeley Rep to YBCA to small groups, all working together to look at how their audiences are feeling about coming back. And that will help, I think, immensely for these companies to understand, okay, so now we're allowed to open the door. What do we need to do to make our audiences feel safe so that they will be willing to buy a ticket and come through the door?
Right. Right. We've only got a couple minutes left, but I just want to touch on the obvious. What can we do to help? I was watching the documentary the other day about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Part of the New Deal were programs that actually put artists and actors to work. I think about the company that Federico Garcia Lorca put together during the Spanish Republic, because the arts and the theater were considered part of the spiritual heart of the nation. How is our government helping theater artists and other artists in the Bay Area? And is it enough? And what do you need to help us get through this great pause?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm heartened that, arts organizations and other nonprofits were included in the PPP. Many of us had a difficult time getting it, but most of the folks that I know who applied have now received their money, including Theater Bay Area, which has been a big help. And that was the first time that nonprofits of any kind were allowed to go for a loan through the Small Business Administration. And that, I think, was some really strong efforts on behalf of our leader, Nancy Pelosi. So that was great. And there is plans at the state level to create a kind of WPA work program. And at the state level, Californians for the Arts, I'm on that board, we are working with the state policymakers to have artists included in that WPA kind of program that the state is looking at creating. We're really understanding arts and artists as second responders in a crisis. This was a concept that came up from the folks at the Sonoma Arts Council following the fires in Santa Rosa, and the way that they saw the first responders, of course, saved people's lives. But the arts were going in after that community was devastated to help people rebuild their lives. And that idea of the art and artists as being second responders is something that we're taking to the state, we're taking to our cities, we're even taking to Capitol Hill to talk about. This is the kind of work that needs to be supported by the federal government, by the state government, by our local governments to really help individuals and our communities rebuild and find a way to restore their lives following this pandemic.
Brad, in closing, what would you like to say to your membership, to the theater companies and the actors and the stagehands, everyone that puts their passion on a stage? What message do you have for them?
I think the message has to be about hope. I mean, we know that theater and the performing arts, all of the arts, have been with us from the very beginning of humanity. It's something that all humans do across all times and across all cultures. No matter what happens with the economy and no matter how long it takes us to reopen our theaters, we will reopen. We will be making theater again and music and dance. And there will be work again in this arena. So hold fast, ask for help if you need it, and we really look forward to coming back into those theaters and seeing our artists on stage.
Great. Thank you, Brad, for what you do on behalf of the clientele of Theater Bay Area and for all theater artists everywhere. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David.
You know, Jen, I was taught that the definition of theater was the revelation of private truth in a public place with passion, and certainly Brad has passion about helping our arts community. Jen, back to you.
Thank you so much, David. What an incredible interview. And it is really hard to wrap our heads around how much this community and this specific arts and entertainment community is impacted by this pandemic. You know, during all of these interviews, we've been brainstorming, can we have small group kind of productions? You know, can we open up our own backyard in West Oakland and bring 30 people together eventually? What can we do to keep this going on and to be a part of the community and be a part of the solution?
Yeah, you know, it's like those old Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney movies, which you're much too young to remember. But, you know, it was always a joke about, you know, I've got a barn, you've got a sewing machine, let's make some costumes and put on a play. There's so much creativity going on now in San Francisco. I mean, I started my career in the arts. I mean, literally, I started my life in the arts. My grandmother gave me piano lessons when I was 5. I paid for college by playing piano and singing in a nightclub. I got my degree in theater and voice. You know, my job was absolutely going to be in theater until I realized I was better backstage. At least I felt I was. But all that training gave me the confidence to do what I do now. I mean, host a TV show, go on camera. So the theater arts are not just a nice to have. They are part of our culture, and the training you get in theater and music and dance is something that no matter what career you go into is going to serve you well. What was your theater background? You must have been on stage at some point.
Well, I grew up in Kenai, Alaska. This is really truly in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in this commercial fishing family. I'm third generation Alaskan, and we had one of the most incredible community theater programs. People came from Seward, they came from Homer, they came from hundreds of miles away to my hometown, and we put on a production. I mean, there's not much else to do in the winters up there, those long, dark winters. We put a musical production on every year. Yeah. Well, so we did community theater. And so from the age of 7 on, I was involved in the theater as well. And I came to college to the University of San Francisco. That's what brought me to the Bay Area. I kept going, did college theater. And also, you know, that was my start. That was my comfort, my time on stage. And I pivoted to a degree in broadcast journalism and have done more of this intimate sort of theater and public speaking work. But I think back to not only getting my start, you know, at the age of 6 or 7 on stage, but also to all the incredible shows I've seen in San Francisco. And I really want to urge anyone who's ever gone to a musical, gone to a play, gone to the symphony, the ballet, I just want to urge you to do something for that community, whatever it is. If it's streaming a live event, if it's hosting something in your own house, eventually, when we're able to, just do something for those people who really are in a place that not many of us can imagine right now.
You know, Jen, I remember the first time I was on stage. I was a knockout, by the way. I sang Sunrise, Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof for my kindergarten graduation, and our teacher's name was, believe it or not, Grace Kelly, and that set me on the path I am on now. But before we go to our next guest, what was your first onstage experience, and do you remember it? I'm sure you were
Oh,
adorable.
I was born in a trunk, is what they wrote about me in the local Peninsula Clarion at the time. But we did Annie Get Your Gun as a musical. We did Music Man, Fiddler on the Roof. Uh, those are the ones that I took a big part in. I was a little bit too young to do a couple of the others. And then here in San Francisco, I saw Wicked. I've seen Les Mis, Cats. I've been to the opening gala of San Francisco Ballet and San Francisco Symphony, and it just goes on and on and on. So, yeah, I sang, let's see, in Music Man, I was Amaryllis, and I had a solo there. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but that's probably a good thing for every single person watching this, because I was a really cute little singer as a child. It's not so cute anymore. I can't really hold a tune anymore. So I guess you can't, some things do need a lot of practice. So.
Yeah, well, I am sure that on stage will be fantastic, and I promise you, after we get to the great pause, I'm going to buy you a big drink of whatever your favorite beverage is, and after a couple, I bet you'll be singing in that bar. But it's just, that's
It's
just what I
true.
think we might get to.
You know me very well. Yeah.
Listen,
I'm a runner, David. I go out and run on the trails, and I run long distances. I did a 27-mile run with my best friend who's in my family cohort group here in the Bay Area. We did this 27-mile run last weekend. And at about mile 25, this weird thing kicks in and I start singing Broadway show tunes. I am so surprised that any of my friends put up with me. She wanted to push me off a cliff at one point, but it does happen. Does happen. True story.
Well, I tell you, you singing Broadway show tunes alone, while you're out running, I mean, you are a gay man in a blonde woman's party. That's just all there is to it.
Again, another true statement. Yes.
Well, I tell you, Jen, we have got lots of incredible artists still to hear from. And I know that you're about to tell us about one incredible institution that is an important and vital part of San Francisco's music scene. Let's take it away and hear about your conversation with Randall Kline from the Jazz Festival.
Well, David, we move right on to our next guest. I am so excited to introduce the founder of SF Jazz, Randall Kline. Randall, welcome to The Great Pause.
Great to be here, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Randall, start off a little bit with the history of jazz in San Francisco. How much of a jazz town is the Bay Area? Or I said how much of a jazz town is the Bay Area, but really let's focus right on San Francisco. Talk to me about the history here.
Well, San Francisco jazz really started in the gold rush. Barbary Coast was the site of lots of houses of ill repute and bars, and along with that, there was some jazz sprinkled in there. So from the very beginning of when jazz was being established in the early 1900s, it was an integral part of San Francisco. The person who claimed to have invented jazz, Jelly Roll Morton, actually lived here in the early 1900s, lived on Market Street. And there's a long history of great jazz clubs and great musicians that have come out of San Francisco. So SF Jazz is really just an evolution, an extension of a history here.
Oh my gosh. So what does a pandemic like this do to this community?
Well, it's devastating to this community and all communities in the world of the arts and music and jazz in particular. People make their livings there and they fulfill their life goals through their vocations. And in this case, it's being a musician. So, we generally put on close to 500 shows a year at the SF Jazz Center. We've got another multiple hundreds of education events that we do along with that. And with those 500 shows, there's hundreds of musicians that come through the center from all around the world, from here in the Bay Area, of course, but throughout the country and other parts. So there's no work, basically, is what it's doing for people, and it's difficult.
Yeah, two of our closest family friends are full-time jazz musicians here in the Bay Area. I live on the other side of the bridge. I live in West Oakland, which is also quite a rich historical history and place for jazz in this area. I haven't yet made it to the SF Jazz Center in Hayes Valley. So tell me a little bit more about that. I'm so anxious to go. Tell me what I should expect to see when doors do open back up.
So the center was built and we opened in January of 2013. SF Jazz as an organization has been here in the Bay Area since 1983. We started as a small community organization that featured only Bay Area artists, and we grew and grew and grew. Eventually, our kind of flagship product at that time was, developed into was the San Francisco Jazz Festival. For its excellence and presenting artists from, again, all over the world. And then the organization, we're a nonprofit presenter, much like set up very similarly to, say, the San Francisco Symphony or San Francisco Opera. And over the course of our evolution as an organization, we decided it would be, we wanted to look into the idea of what it would mean to have our own building. We presented over the 30 years prior to opening the SF Jazz Center in probably 25 different venues around the Bay Area, mostly in San Francisco, but also in Oakland. Paramount Theater actually is still a venue we use occasionally as well, too. So the center opened, and the intent was to create the best jazz experience that could be possible in the world. It's the product of a $66 million capital campaign to build this place. We are so fortunate to have such incredible support in the Bay Area to help something like this happen. A building like this devoted to just what the Bay Area place that it can happen, and it's going extremely well. This was to be our 9th season coming up in September in the building, coming close to the 10th anniversary of the project. The history is it's become an important part of the cultural life of San Francisco. Our season opens September alongside our now neighbors, the symphony and the opera, and much anticipated buzz around this one here. We really in a short amount of time in the building, although over the course of the 30 plus years, we've become a real integral part of the fabric of the cultural life of San Francisco. So the center, physically in the same neighborhood as those great institutions, and we are now, trying to react to this crisis and continue to do what we can to stay open and healthy, so that when we do come back, we'll be better than ever.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, a magic crystal ball, but do you have any sense of when we might be able to walk through those doors again?
Well, in some form or another, optimistically, we're hoping for something. Just recently, there was a first test case actually in Arkansas of a rock concert that took place, and there's a lot to be learned. But basically, the industry is really figuring it out. It's going to be social distancing in the hall and lots of health precautions as we gradually move into it. But I'm optimistically shooting for something in September, when we would have opened our season. We were scheduled to open the Thursday after Labor Day weekend, and if there's some way to do it, we will. We've got, we're in the middle of an experiment right now, a program. We're broadcasting a show every week, every Friday. It's called Fridays at 5, and it may be a hybrid of what those concerts are, but live. So they look like live concerts, actually. So I can launch a little bit into what Fridays at 5 is. But
I was just going to ask you about how you're staying connected to your audience. I mentioned that we have two very close family friends who are full-time jazz musicians. They're giving lessons over video chat, like similar to how we're chatting now. They are also giving concerts. So let's dive into Fridays at 5. I know you have a really exciting musician this week. And then is this going to go on weekly until doors open again?
Yes, and probably after we reopen the building as well, too. So when we built the building in 2013, we set it up with full-on broadcast capabilities, camera systems, and we've been recording most of the concerts that have taken place there. And one of the things that SF Jazz has a reputation for is sort of excellence in programming and programs that only happen at the SF Jazz Center. And so we've gone back through the archives here and sort of taken sort of a best of what we've presented over the last few years and kind of edited those concerts slightly down to about 1 hour. And it is a way to sort of get into a different kind of rhythm right now of that Friday at 5 o'clock, end of the work week, when we were all in that normal-ish kind of rhythm, and time to relax a little bit and watch a great performance. What's a little different about this performance is you'll see the performance is shot in a particular style that we've designed to feel a little more present and live. In fact, actually, the first few broadcasts when we did, this is the 7th week of the program coming up this week, we had a lot of people on the chat box, which is part of the program, asking, why are all those people there? Well, how did you get permission to do that? And so it really gives the sense that you're there. So basically, these are concerts that we charge, to become a member of SF Jazz at $5 a month, basically to watch these programs that are broadcast every Friday at 5 o'clock. And then there is a tip jar attached to that as well, too, to your question about what we can do also for musicians. In that tip jar, euphemistically called, people can contribute what they like, and that money goes between us and the performer. We split 50-50, and it's a way to help musicians who aren't working get through this particular time. And so the tip jars have been great. Last week we sent, we're going to send off, with checks in the range of anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 every week from the broadcast, from the tip jar to artists, which is fantastic. It helps us, our staff, keep working. Our technical crew is helping in all these broadcasts, doing sound and what you're doing right here on your show. So,
Randall, you're reading my mind. You're getting to my next question. Thank you so much. I just have really one, maybe two quick questions for you. I want to know a little bit about that Art Tatum photograph behind you there.
So this is it's a great story. So not a great story, it's a great photograph. The photographer's name is Herman Leonard, probably the greatest documenter of jazz from New Orleans. And when we opened the building, actually there's a tie, I've owned this photo for a long time. We did something years ago where I had access to purchase this print. And I love it. My father was a piano player. I love piano. I love Art Tatum. So it's a poignant, deep photo of him not playing the piano, but contemplative. When we opened the building, we're right across the street from an abandoned San Francisco Unified School District school, Commerce High School, that's been shuttered for close to 50 years. And it's not the most attractive building. The windows, a lot of them are broken or in disrepair as well, too. And as you saw from the photo earlier of the SF Jazz Center, it's all windows and it's all about looking in and looking out. We really wanted to place ourselves in the neighborhood of Hayes Valley where you could see what was in this building. This was the part of the architecture we chose and beautifully executed by the architect Marke, who also lives in the Bay Area. But this idea to be able to look in and see what's in the building. Well, when you can look in and see what's happening in the building, into the lobby spaces and even into the two performance spaces there, you can also look out from the lobbies. And a lot of the view was onto this building that was not looking so great. So we approached the San Francisco School District and asked if we could install these jazz portraits in the windows. And I believe I think there's 21 windows that are there. And we approached Herman Leonard's estate if we could use some of his portraits. This particular photo behind me here actually was one of the portraits in those windows. And since then, we've had it's become actually an interesting exhibition space for the neighborhood. So we've had 3 different photographers rotate through there now, and one was a San Francisco photographer, Jim Marshall. We were just about to change out to another photographer. So every year or twice a year, we unveil a new exhibition across the street. So when people are in the building or you're driving by in Hayes Valley, you see this beautiful display of historic jazz figures that help set a context for what we do in this very contemporary building and looking forward for jazz. So sorry for the long-winded explanation of Art Tatum, but
We're also huge Jim Marshall fans, so I love that. And it's also another way that you're really supporting the arts in San Francisco. We can't thank you enough for that. Last question. How are you, Randall Kline, getting through these unprecedented times?
Well, it's like I think just how everyone else is. You know, you've been dealt a card. We've all been dealt a card, and life doesn't stop. So you keep moving. My wife is active, busy. Full-time job. She's able to do that from home as well too. I'm able to do that. The kind of common refrain from everybody is how many Zoom calls they've been on in a day, and that's sort of been our life. I mean, SF Jazz is a real institution, and we've got to keep rolling. And so the day to day, not only of how we keep things moving day to day, but also trying to anticipate. Back to your earlier question, what's your most, when do you see returning? We've got to play out all these scenarios right now. We've got to run, try to figure out what we're going to look like when we open, what we're going to look like while we're closed, how we do all these things. So how Randall Kline personally is doing, I'm very involved in the future of SF Jazz and trying to figure out the ways we can actually turn this crisis into an opportunity for this organization so that we do come back as a better organization and more connected to our community. And Fridays at 5 has really been a beautiful thing for us to be connected somewhat with the community. And we're going to start looking at expanding those digital offerings. There really is no replacement for being live. And I guess personally, to your question, I really miss being there myself. I mean, it's nothing gives me greater joy than to sit in that auditorium, gorgeously intimate, beautiful auditorium, acoustically perfect place to hear music for someone who's a jazz fan. So it's torturous not to be there. So I'm really looking forward to being back there and, missing. I mean, I guess I'm really missing what live music can bring to my life, but it's also missing the joy of being able to spread that around a little bit like we do at the center.
Well, you'll have a whole lot more people joining you this Friday for Fridays at 5. I know I'll be there. I know David will be there. Everyone here from Beyond Picks and the Great Pause. So thank you so much for everything you're doing for our community, for jazz in our community, and just stay healthy, stay well, and we hope to talk with you again very soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, David, what's your favorite jazz song?
Oh boy, that's hard. I mean, as I told you, I was trained as a pianist, but I was trained as a classical pianist. And I've always had admiration for people who could play jazz and just sit down, and every time you play something, it's different. I mean, that's the magic of jazz. It's one of the most in the moment art forms because my playing of a jazz song is going to be different from yours or someone else's. But to answer your question, I would say it sounds kind of hokey, but people forget that one of the great jazz singers of all time is the official singing ambassador of San Francisco, Tony Bennett. So I think Tony Bennett singing "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," even if it's not a rockin' jazz song, that would have to be my favorite.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great classic. My husband loves Calix, the Berkeley-based radio station, and recently he heard a song on there, and he made my daughter and I both come down from upstairs and listen to it. It's Mal, is that right? Mal Waldron's "The Call." Highly encourage you to listen to that one. We just sat and listened to it over and over in a pandemic, in sheltering in place. It's kind of the perfect song. And then, I grew up with Louis Armstrong, "What a Wonderful World," and, the great Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald, and then all the way to more modern times with the Marsalis brothers, Wynton Marsalis. It's just, such an incredible art form and just wonderful to remember what that's like. And then Randall Kline, that interview was so wonderful, and just imagining, he was really able to take me kind of physically back into that space and imagining what that will be like when we are allowed back in. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, that's the magic of music. When you hear a song, it instantly takes you back to where you were when you heard that song. Like when you talked about "It's a Wonderful World," I remember when I worked in the cruise ship industry, I worked my way around the world aboard ship for over 2 years. And every time we would leave a port, that's what would play. And, as soon as you hear songs like that, it takes you back. I mean, I think of all the many times I've been at the Fairmont, Bay Area Cabaret, Bimbos, any of the
Oh,
incredible
yeah.
clubs that are north or south of Market, to hear musical performances that if I went back the next night, I might be listening to the same musician or the same artist, but it would be a completely different performance. That's the magic of live performance, whether it's theater or dance or singing or opera, but especially with jazz. I mean, I think it
Yeah.
would be hard to think of an art form that is more in the moment than
Yeah.
jazz.
Yeah. And what an
You know,
institution, like Bimbos. Yeah. Incredible.
yeah, well, I know that you've got someone else who is probably one of the more out there and educated people about San Francisco's nightlife. Let's hear your conversation.
Bernal, Potrero, San Miguel, Telegraph. There are 47 named hills in San Francisco. And as those people who have spent their lives fighting for social and economic justice here know, there's always that one more hill to climb. Our next guest is the arts editor at 48 Hills. That's San Francisco and the Bay Area's independent alternative news and culture site, founded by former editors and publishers of the San Francisco Bay Guardian. Welcome, Marke Bieschke from 48 Hills. Hi, Marke.
Hey, hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's so nice to see you here. I know that the city organized a virtual nightlife and entertainment summit just this last Monday. Really, the whole point there was to address the state of nightlife since so many bars, like music venues, are closed down. And I know you covered the summit, but then you also have a personal take on it too. But let's start with the journalism part. What's your biggest takeaway from the summit?
Yes, this was the first real get together of owners, bar workers, performers, DJs since the COVID shutdown. And the number very stark that came out of it. It was presented by the San Francisco Entertainment Commission, and they kind of gathered city officials in the first half to give a report about where we are right now. And as you can imagine, all of the bars and clubs, music venues, everything else shut down. The numbers were alarming. The first big number was that 18% of San Francisco is unemployed right now, with an employment rate of 18%, and up to 50% of that is nightlife and entertainment workers. So that's huge for the business, almost a bulldozer going through the business. And hearing that said out loud was very striking. The other striking numbers that came out were that the city is really not looking for nightlife to come back in any semblance of what it was until the end of 2021. So that's about a year and a half away. Our nightclubs going, music venues going in any kind of capacity, let alone what they were before. They said in terms of fairs and festivals, which are huge tourist drivers, and of course, big economic factors for the city. The night entertainment business in the city is a $7.2 billion business. Fairs and festivals, which are a huge part of that, are probably not going to come back in full capacity until 2023. So hearing those numbers was just really alarming. Obviously, things can change until then. Governor Newsom has said that he's going to be allowing to accelerate opening as they see fit when they hit certain targets. But for a lot of gig workers, drag queens, DJs, artists, sound techs, really don't know when they're going to be employed again, and that's really, really scary.
Marke, I just want to take you back for a second. Sorry about that. I just want to take you back for a second and just make sure I heard you correctly. End of 2021 for bars to reopen in the Bay Area? I'm sorry, let me pick my jaw up off the floor. Oh my God.
When I heard that, I had the same reaction. And, it's really, bars and restaurants may start reopening in some capacity in the next few months. Definitely, maybe towards the end of the year, we're looking at a social distancing kind of situation for restaurants and bars where people will be able to sit outside. Alcohol will be able to be served and sold outside to ensure social distancing. Obviously, enforce at the door or inside. But for those nightlife experiences that we think of when we think of a night on the town, it's going to be not for a long time.
And you also mentioned music festivals, not until 2023. I mean, I am having such a hard time wrapping my head around that. I mean, we all know, somewhere out there that it's going to take a while, but thinking about 3 years, it's just, you said it's like a bulldozer going right through this industry. It's like a tsunami going through the industry. It's hard to fathom. And my heart just goes out to everyone who works in that industry. And I know that the summit also talked about really the future of nightlife. And even though it's so far out, what might opening up bars and clubs look like, whether it's 2021 or opening up bigger venues 2023? What might that be like?
Well, it was, although those numbers are really alarming, I felt like there was a positive that came out of this summit as we're looking towards the future. Now, most people have been able to file for unemployment. We have some wonderful community structures set up to help those in need in the industry. So a lot of people are at least feeling like they can look towards the future. As for what it might look like, as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of enforcement of masks and social distancing, a lot of very gradual open up. Large venues will be treated a little bit different than small venues, and capacities are going to be very, very well enforced. But what some positive things that came out of it were, and these are real silver linings, but the fact that larger concert acts have had to cancel their tours means that when these venues, local artists and musicians will be called on to fill them up. The same with certain traveling museum shows, the same with performers. So we might see a renaissance of local arts in our big performance halls, in our main spaces, simply because of travel here. So, that's one silver line, but it'll be a big opportunity and lead to more.
Oh, I love that. I love that you're looking at those silver linings. I mean, that is the best that most of us can hope for right now. And in the Bay Area, we have so many incredibly talented people. So I'm anxious just to get back out and see some of those local performances and performers. Also, I'm wondering, Mark, how are nightlife workers and performers feeling right now? And what are some of the biggest ways people like me who just really live here for that kind of extra, activity in this area, how can we help?
That's a great question. Thank you. And, a lot that was talked about was how performers have really created shifting online. There's online drag shows, online DJ performers and artists telling you how to do things, teaching lessons. There's almost too much of that to keep my feel of the day because I've visited with so many different performers. But I think finding those performers and patronizing them online and tipping them online has been a huge help. There's also been GoFundMes and other crowdfunding situations that have been put in place for bar owners. A lot of bar owners are feeling a little desperate right now because they still have to pay rent and cover. Of course, they can't open. And so going to your favorite bar's website or your favorite nightclub's website, finding their GoFundMe, almost everyone has one right now, and contributing if you can is really the biggest help right now. Reach your favorite performers who probably have a personal GoFundMe or crowdfunding. The best way to help right now.
Well, Mark, in addition to being a journalist, you also own one of my all-time favorite Bay Area bars. It's a true San Francisco institution, the Stud. I mean, who among us doesn't have a story about the Stud? And we heard late last night that the Stud is closing. I'm in total shock. I'm so, so sorry. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you so much for that question, Jennifer. You know, it's a huge announcement, and we're right now in the middle of a process of mourning as well as a process of figuring out our next steps. We really had to make the choice between paying rent and utilities and not being able to any revenue and closing up shop now so that we could reopen in the future somewhere else and keep the Stud alive for patients. I think it's a decision a lot of small bars are going to be facing in the future, which is so and reflects where we're at. Like other places, we've launched a GoFundMe that's online. You can find out more details about that at sf.com. As we planned a funeral for this space, because this is a place where so many people grew up, so many people had their first experience. I think you're in that cohort too, Jennifer, and so we wanted to have a proper send-off for this space that so many people have for so many years. 33 years we've been in this space, and we've been operating for 55 years. So it's a big thing. We'll be having a drag funeral space online on May 31st. So we'd like to invite everybody to come to that and share their condolences and wonderful memories. And more details about that will be on the Stud's website as well, studsf.com. So right now we're just so sad, but we're looking forward to a time when we can reopen in the future with every other bar and club in the city and bring us back to life. I feel like the love from the community has been so supportive of us.
Yeah, incredible. Mark Bieschke, publisher and art editor of 48 Hills and one of the collective owners of the Stud. And as you've heard, the Stud has now announced that it is closing permanently. David, I am in shock and I'm so sad.
Yeah.
This pandemic, you know, there are very few things that have driven home the lasting implications of this pandemic in such an incredible way. I was telling Mark earlier that, you know, being the little country bumpkin coming to the big city, I had never ridden a bus before, let alone, you know, gone out clubbing. And one of my first and best experiences throughout college was going to the Stud late at night and dancing with all my best friends. You know, you could go there. It was loving. Guys wouldn't hit on us. It was perfect, you know, for a group of young women who just wanted to go and dance and have a blast. I just have so many wonderful and fond memories of that place. I just hope, beyond all hope, that they will reopen. It might not be in the same place, but that they will reopen again someday. What do you think about all of this?
Well, I remember my first day in San Francisco was October 1st, 1986. And I'm quite sure that my second night was at the Stud. I'm pretty sure that when they have that drag funeral next week, if they look maybe behind one of the crates, they might find a kind of Alexander Julian 1980s a very preppy T-shirt that I'm sure I tossed off before I went to the dance floor.
You can sell that thing. I'd buy that on eBay, by the way. I would totally buy that on eBay. And I am hoping that Mark will save us all little bits and pieces of some kind of relic from the Stud, because I would put that up on the wall and pay homage to it every single day of my life.
Yeah, well, you know, you talk about relics. I mean, I was raised a Catholic boy in Richmond, Virginia. And, you know, as a Catholic, then I always believed in at resurrection in the San Francisco arts community. So I really believe.
Uh-oh, having a little bit of technical glitch there. But, you know, I believe, too, that we'll come back stronger. That includes with you, David, getting your signal tied in a little bit stronger. But until that second, have you ever heard of a musical instrument called a about guest. She's an acclaimed musician, composer, actress, and total Renaissance woman. And David has more with her.
Thanks, Jen. You know, the cultural and artistic response to COVID-19 has been moving and of course, unique. And one of the most unique and moving essays I've read during this whole period was by a longtime friend and colleague of mine, our next guest, BeiBei Song. BeiBei, welcome to The Great Pause.
Thank you, David. So nice to see you here.
So before we start, tell us a little bit about your work as a writer and an artist. I've known you for many years, but I've known you in a professional capacity. I was very moved by the essay you wrote. How have you used your past experience to come to this moment and express what it's like during the Great Pause?
David, it's interesting to hear you call me an artist and writer. I guess I feel a little more comfortable with writer. I still feel a little insecure when people do call me artist, and thank you for calling me that. I feel a little insecure because I'm probably not by the traditional definition an artist. However, I have been living life the artist way ever since I discovered an artist inside more than a decade ago, and I have I've been trying to work the artist way as well. And my medium is a little unusual. It's entrepreneurial ventures that embed art in it. And at the moment, or in this current episode of my entrepreneurial venture, which I call it Essinova 2.0, you are familiar with my work with Essinova 1.0. The current chapter, we actually try to bring out the artist in everyone and giving them the training and the tools to live life artfully, whatever their profession is, and to also be the catalyst for change towards more beautiful business and society. So in that sense, I guess I am an artist.
Yeah, well, you know, you say I know about Essinova 1.0 and 2.0. Has the COVID-19 pandemic made you think that maybe there's a 3.0? How has COVID-19 changed what you do, bringing an artful context to work?
Well, I'm not sure about 3.0 yet. We are in 2.0 for sure, and we're active in it. And we think that now we need art and artful thinking and artist's way of living and working more than ever. I can tell you a little bit about how I personally reacted when this epidemic or pandemic hit. So of course, like many people, I had to, it was raw emotions. I had to process that first. First, it was just this biological instinct to protect, myself and my parents and my loved ones. And having been exposed to the origin, exposed to the crisis, which started in China, I was more cautious earlier, started to put on masks before everyone else did. And after that, the next, at the same time, you have feelings for the others and you want to know how you can contribute. And at the same time, you begin to think about what is this teaching us? What are we learning? What meanings can we make out of this? So with all of these thinking and all of these thoughts and emotions, I was compelled to write that article that you mentioned, basically to process all this stuff that was going through my head and my heart. It was kind of like a snake having to shed the skin. So that was exactly, the article is exactly what I was feeling at the moment, and also what going in the back of my mind, what I wanted to do, how we can contribute. So Essinova, as you know, we try to cultivate the extraordinary through art, leveraging art for human development, leadership, and innovation. So I decided to start this program called Artful in Quarantine to apply our methodology, our way of doing things to this crisis as our way to contribute. as you know, I mean, we need medicine for diseases, for our physical health, but next to the physical health is our mental health. And art and music are the medicine, the vitamins, the vaccine, and the chocolate and wine for our mind and for our spirit. And I felt that's exactly what people need at this time. So the program, which we call a Play Shop series, is to help calm, enchant, and energize people. You know, I love the show of your name, the name of your show, The Great Pause. This is exactly how I see it as well. It's a pause that we were not taking on our own before. And this crisis is forcing us to pause. Life was getting too fast. We did not have time to reflect, not reflecting enough. And now we are forced to reflect, to think about, and to slow down. And another one is that life was getting so complicated. We need to go back to the basics and appreciate the essential. So those are some of the premises for the program. And the response was very heartwarming. We had people from around the world join us, and people were uplifted. They were inspired. They told us that we brought them to places of bliss and peace. They were inspired to think about how they can use this time to not only re-energize themselves, but also to see what change that they can bring to the world. So it has been very encouraging, the response. And we have formed a community after this to continue to support each other and to continue to learn.
BeiBei, what are some of the things that people can do to live, as you say, a more artful life?
Well, a few suggestions. One is to develop a meditative practice through art. People don't know art and music can be very meditative. And so that's a simple way to start to get connected with your senses and emotions. Practice your mindfulness that way. And to start with, anywhere, you don't have to begin with a formal art class. You can start doodle, start to use colors and shapes to represent what you're feeling, what you reflect on today. And you can even use your accessible materials. You know, we have examples of fun artwork that people made with vegetables and fruits now that they don't have access to a lot of art materials. So just get started right now, and we have resources on our webpage and in our community to give people more ideas and more practice.
So a question I guess I should have asked you years ago, since we've been friends and colleagues for a while. Where does the name Essinova come from? And then after you tell me that, talk about this new community that has developed out of COVID-19, because I know your community roots were already very broad and rich and based in this artful way of doing business.
Yeah, essence of innovation. It's very simple. Essinova stands for the essence of innovation. So as you know, it was the first chapter was innovation for, we call it innovation for the well-being of humanity. We focused on health and environmental innovation because I felt those are the areas that are really meaningful, very important. Yes, the community has been, it's a broad community, and the second phase, the second chapter, it's about what we call the new Renaissance, the 21st century Renaissance. It brings a convergence of knowledge from science and technology, and of course innovation and business. But also we want to promote the role of art and humanities, which we believe it is dearly needed at this moment in time, in this crucial phase of history. So that's why the community is broad.
You mentioned a word that I use a lot because I'm a student of history, and the Renaissance has always fascinated me. Do you think that we're on the verge of some sort of Renaissance because of COVID-19?
Well, I don't know if it's because of COVID-19, but I think the COVID-19 is happening in that transition period. I do think that we need another renaissance, and we are on the verge of another renaissance. And that, to me, this renaissance to me is a return to humanism, not only technological solutions. It's a return to beauty. And those are the things that we really need for this, this time in history. And it's also the, again, the convergence of knowledge, the different streams of intelligence and creativity. So that is my belief. And I think in many ways, this pandemic can be this impetus for that process, for that rebirth, creative rebirth. That's what I call.
Well, thank you, BeiBei. You know, as my mentor, the Reverend Anthony Turney, used to say, it's an ill wind that doesn't blow someone some good. And certainly COVID-19 continues to be a very ill wind. But if we can make some artful beauty out of that, all for the better. And artists and writers and entrepreneurs like you are helping us get there. So, BeiBei Song, thank you for your work. And on a personal note, please give our very best to your dear sister and your parents. 谢谢.
Likewise, my best to Alfredo and your community. They're invited to join us in our community, and they're welcome to watch our videos that will be posted on the webpage.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with BeiBei Song. Jen, back to you.
Thank you so much, David. You know, to create something great, you have to have the space for it, right? Well, we have a contest where you could win an edge desk. This is the MacGyver-style edge desk that arrives fully assembled. It's one compact piece of furniture that transforms into basically whatever you need it to, a sit-down chair, a desk, a standing desk if you're short like me, or even an art-friendly easel. It's like a Murphy bed made for productivity, and it tucks away in an instant. To win this ultimate work-from-home gadget, please send us a photo to The Great Pause at beyondpix.com. I hate to say it like this, David, but you know, the most pitiful office setup right now. Well, you will be the winner because our impartial judges will look at all of the photos. We have a little over a dozen so far, and then we'll decide whose home space is the biggest mess. I mean, work from home office, most in need of the desk. So we'll announce the winner next week, same time, same show. The deadline to enter is May 26th, so get on it. Send an email to the address. It appeared on your screen a second ago. The Great Pause, there it is again, at beyondpix.com. Now, back to our show and David with our next interview. David?
Thanks, Jen. You know, a few years ago, I had the privilege of meeting a truly unique artist here in San Francisco. Not only an incredible voice, but an incredible story, an incredible inspiration to many people. I'm very proud to have as our next guest, Soprano Breanna Sinclairé. Breanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, Breanna, I remember when we met, our mutual friend Michael, who is a producer of mine at another show, said, I have a woman who is an incredible talent, and she also happens to have been the first person to have sang the national anthem at a major sporting event, who also just happened to be transgender. And from there, you got incredible international attention. This past April, you were supposed to make your international stage debut in an opera, Bound, for Against the Grain Theater in Toronto. Well, we all know what a difference a pandemic can make. Obviously, that premiere didn't happen. Over the last few months since COVID happened, literally putting your career and your training on hold, what has it been like for you as first a singer and also as a transgender woman dealing with COVID-19?
It's a challenge. I mean, life happens, and I think as an artist, you have to accept the fact that life happens. And how do you maneuver, you know, through those challenges? It has been a challenge, but I'm very thankful that, you know, I'm alive and well. And, you know, as trans folks, you know, we go through our own personal issues. So with that, along with the COVID crisis that's affecting people all over the world, it can take a huge toll on your mental health and your emotional health. And so, but I am hanging in there, and, music never stops. So even if this is happening, I've learned that music never stops. You can always create and make music.
Like many artists, you work to support your art. I know that you work with the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, which at the best of times is always a challenge. I remember when I was in school, I waited tables and played piano to support my work. So if you're in the arts, it's like having two careers simultaneously. You've done, however, an incredible amount of training. For those who aren't familiar with your career, quickly take us through how you started and what professional development you have had and continue to have, specifically with operatic training.
Yes, so my voice went through a series of changes. So I started off as a tenor before I transitioned, and then from a mezzo soprano to now a lyric soprano. I'm currently studying with Sherry Greenewald at the San Francisco Opera, and also she's the artistic director of the Marla program, and she is like my mother, my third mother. Well, I have a lot of mothers, but she is really a mentor in my life, and she has really worked on my craft tremendously. And I am still shocked at what the work that she has done with my voice. I went to art school most of my life. I went to Baltimore School for the Arts. For 2 summers during my high schooling, I went to a summer arts program called Tanglewood Institute in Lenox, Massachusetts. And during that summer, I learned so much, and I met so many people, and I met folks who were in the boys choir of Harlem. And it was great because, music was my escape, dealing with a family that didn't accept me. I was quite unique in my family. I never felt like I fit the right gender. And so music was a way of an escape. But I actually did start my classical training at 12 because of my grandmother, Lynn Bowen. She introduced me to this field of music, this genre of music, and I became so obsessed with it. And I remember at 5, I saw my first opera, Madame Butterfly, by Bocchini, and I specifically said to my grandmother that this is a career that I want to do for the rest of my life, because, when I was 5, looking at the costumes and the orchestra and the music and the staging, I was so enthralled by that beauty. And I naturally had a gift of singing, because my family are musicians. My father plays 12 instruments. My mother plays the cello and the flute, and my grandmother is a great singer. So I really do believe that my singing came from my grandmother and maybe my father, but he thinks he can sing.
Right.
So.
And also, you are a graduate of the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, correct?
Yes, I graduated in 2013 from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and it was very challenging because, I was the only trans woman in the voice department. And, it's like I say, being a trans person, it's not like you're gay where you can actually hide, I guess kind of tone it down, but I couldn't, people like physically saw me transition. So, and that was, it was really rough. And, not having much money and working 3 jobs and trying to finish school. But I am extremely thankful that my wonderful teacher, she really pushed me to be a great singer and took it step by step with me, because when I got in as a master's student, all the other students were, advanced and good to go and ready to like venture out into the world. And I was actually just starting to sing mezzo soprano. And so I really had to start from the beginning in my master's program. So that was really difficult.
Right. So, Breanna, there's so many stories about how you have transitioned and you've inspired people both in the transgender community, but in the artistic and musical community as well. I've heard people's comments, I've talked to them, I've read the interviews you've done. Right now, during this moment, during COVID-19, the arts community is being impacted in incredible ways. In general, what can you say that would give hope and inspiration to other performing artists in general, and specifically to other singers during this time? How are we going to come out of it? And what advice can you give?
As artists, like myself, we are continually evolving. And, this COVID pandemic, which is terrible for many people, folks have lost their jobs, the unemployment rate has increased. There's some very major big issues going on in our world that has taken a huge impact. But I think as a singer specifically, I think continually working on your voice, continually picking music that will strengthen your technique. So I think that as a performer, it just never ends. That's kind of been my process during this experience, is that I've continually worked on my repertoire. I've continually connected with my coach and figure out what can I do during this period of silence and closure, so that I can keep growing,
Keep on keeping on.
Yes.
Breanna, in our last few moments, talk to me specifically about what this experience has been like on a personal level. What was the worst day or period for you, and the best day, something that inspired you and said, well, yesterday wasn't a great day, but this experience or this conversation I had, maybe with another artist or whatnot, has given me the hope and the inspiration to go on?
The Metropolitan Opera just started this HD free. They show operas. It's like for free. You log in and you watch free operas, and I think that's kind of been my inspiration. And watching a lot of opera productions kind of just keep me uplifted. I would say the first week of quarantine was really rough for me, and I'm sure it was rough for many people because there was so much uncertainty. It might sound corny, but during that first week, I actually went in the living room, took up my keyboard, and I just started doing scales, and I started singing some arias, and that kind of relieved me, and it gave me peace. But also I was dealing with a lot of things, the production of Bound that was supposed to be taking place in Toronto, Canada was postponed. And so a lot of things were just hitting me all at once. And I'm sure it was hitting a lot of folks all at once, from losing jobs, productions being halted and everything.
Do you ever think of yourself consciously as an inspiration to other artists and specifically to other members of the trans community?
Yeah, I don't want to call myself, I guess, a role model trans community because that is such a heavy crown to hold. But I am one of the many trans folks who are paving ways for other trans folks to be their true selves and to be whatever field they're in. Yes, my focus is classical music, but that also shows audiences that we as trans folks, we're human people. We can have the same training, we can work the same jobs, we can do whatever we want, in this world, and I think, my performance and other trans folks who are out there doing great things are opening the eyes of folks who sees us as just circus freaks, and we're not freaks, we're human beings. And I continually say that our rights are getting continuously stripped away from us. Trans women of color, trans Black women are getting killed. And I don't think people understand that they're dealing with a human life, a human life that deserves to go to the store and get groceries. They deserve to go to the mall without being gawked at. They deserve to go to a restaurant with their friends and have a good time. We're human beings. And so, I am so honored that, the universe, God, whoever it is that has given me this gift of song, to uplift people and to uplift the community.
Your story is one of continual inspiration to me, and I know the community. And I can assure you that when we come out of this COVID-19 crisis, there'll be a lot of people who will look forward to crowding into a theater and hearing you on stage. Thank you for speaking with us today, Breanna.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Jen, a hard interview to top, but back to you.
I know. Where do we go from here? Such inspiration today. And just thank you so much, David, for bringing us into your world in such a way and for getting all of these incredible guests to come on and talk with us. What an incredible group of people. We have been so honored and just so blessed to work with at Beyond Picks and the AV Society, Anita over at Beyond Picks. It's just been an incredible ride here, even during a great pause.
Yeah, well, I think all of us are artists. BeiBei said, it's so nice of you to consider me an artist, but maybe it's because I grew up in an artistic family. All my great aunts, Helen, Blanche, my grandmother, Margaret. My whole family, all the women who raised me, they were kind of like the cast of Designing Women. I all thought of them as artists. They played piano, they sang. My grandmother sewed, and that was artistry. My mother was an artist in the sense that she was one of the first women executives at AT&T Telephone. So I think we're all artists. You, the people at Beyond Picks. I think that's the purpose of today's show. To whatever we do, to bring the art to it, to bring the heart to it. And maybe this great pause is giving us a chance to not work so fast and really find the artfulness in all of us.
What do I say to that? That's like, boom, in, done, mic drop. You're incredible. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You're in so many ways. I think I agree with BeiBei. Our world needed to change. We were going too fast. We were doing too much, and we were running on empty. So many of us, and so it has been an incredible time to look toward and for the silver linings. And I know that one of the biggest silver linings for me personally has been having my freshman in college home again and to not have to travel for work across the country every other week. Just kind of slowing down has been a real blessing. And I know that might be really hard for some folks to hear as we look at unemployment and layoffs in such a changed world. It's a really scary time, but hopefully as a community, we can just keep really leaning on each other.
Yeah, and Jen, we've said this before, that cliche that has come out of COVID, we're all in the same boat. Well, no, we're not all in the same boat, but we are in the same storm. And, to stretch the maritime analogy, I have a sailboat behind me and a cruise ship behind me. I really believe that even though many of us are struggling and people have lost jobs, and it's going to be a challenging few months. I don't believe a few years. I'm an optimist. I believe it's going to be a challenging few months. But sometime soon, because of artful creativity, people are going to catch the wind in their sails, and that's going to help us move forward. Jen, I think you've got someone to talk all about that.
Well, with unemployment rates at the highest peak in decades, now 1 in every 6 people in America out of work, families everywhere trying to figure out how to survive this pandemic and look for a new job. But here is something very few of the newly unemployed might realize. There's a lot of work out there, a lot of it, and it might just be a few clicks away. So we are really excited to welcome Scott Bonneau, like the musician, VP of Global Talent Attraction, HR Analytics, and HR Technology. How can I forget, because you're a musician yourself, that your last name is just like that other famous guy's last name?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm here in my recording studio turned makeshift home office during the pandemic, and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know this is a super serious topic, and yet there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's some good news here for people, especially here in the Bay Area. Let's dive right in. How many jobs are available to people in the Bay Area right now?
So we're definitely seeing impacts from the pandemic on the job economy in the Bay Area, as well as much of the rest of the world. And so right now, job postings are down about 43.5% from where they were at the same point in time in 2019.
Okay, what kind of jobs are we seeing available to people right now? Are they minimum wage jobs? Are we seeing a lot of work from home, a lot of more freelance or kind of contract work right now?
Yeah, there's a healthy mix. So, the top 5 job postings from employers in the Bay Area right now include software engineer and senior software engineering jobs, as well as retail sales associates, customer service representatives, and delivery drivers. And from the job seeker perspective, we are seeing people searching for customer service representative jobs, software engineering jobs, administrative assistants, delivery drivers, and interns are some of the highest frequency searches that we're seeing from job seekers in the Bay Area right now.
What are some of the biggest surprises as you look through the numbers of who's hiring right now?
I don't know about surprises, but we're seeing, a healthy mix of critical infrastructure companies and services, biomedical and healthcare, as well as retail, service industry, and technology jobs. So, among the employers who are fairly active on the platform right now in the San Francisco Bay Area includes Facebook, Genentech, Roche, Kaiser Permanente, Taco Bell, DoorDash, Bevmo, the Postal Service, PG&E, as well as Speedy Oil Change and Auto Service.
So there's a little something for everyone out there. What's your advice for someone who was recently laid off or facing unemployment? What would you tell them right now?
I think one of the biggest things that job seekers can do is take the steps that they can to make themselves available to employers. So, with Indeed, you can upload or update your resume. We've added a hashtag to Indeed to indicate, for job seekers to indicate that they are ready to work. So hashtag ready to work is something that they can indicate to employers that they can start immediately. And we've seen that's something that hundreds of thousands of job seekers have done. We have one of Indeed's products that we launched over the last few years is something called hiring events, where individual employers or sometimes groups of employers will hold an event, not unlike a job fair, to identify and come into contact with a number of candidates for a bunch of open roles. We've now pivoted that to virtual hiring events, and we've now hosted more than 200 of those virtual hiring events on the platform. And that allows job seekers to sort of skip a perhaps long and burdensome application process, move directly into a safe online and remote interview with an employer. And all of these things help with getting job seekers information and their availability directly in front of employers, which can help both increase the chances of finding a role and the speed of finding a new role.
What's the biggest change when you're looking for a job today as we start reopening, the different phases of reopening? Is it safe to go in for a face-to-face interview, or are there things that you really need to take into account if you're doing a virtual interview? Are those two scenarios truly different, and are there any insider tips or tricks we should know if we're doing an interview virtually versus in person?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things here. I mean, one is we've definitely seen a spike in both job seeker interest for remote work as well as employers posting for jobs that explicitly describe themselves as being remote work, either permanently or temporarily due to the current health crisis. And so on the employer side of things, we've also introduced a tag where employers can tag their jobs as remote work, which allows job seekers to find those roles as well. With respect to remote interviewing, I think we are sort of in the largest social experiment in maybe ever around how do we conduct business when some basic assumptions that we've made in the past about people's availability in person not being things that we can do anymore. And there's been, I think, quite a bit of innovation in this space, even just over the last couple of months, including in places like Indeed with virtual hiring events and providing the facility for online remote interviewing in a very expedient and effective way. But I think, the truth is that job seekers and employers are all still in the process of figuring this out. And so I think that we're going to continue to see this emerging over time and things changing, and hopefully, people finding those ways to be, efficient and effective at this sort of new way of living and working.
Tell me a little bit more about Indeed in general.
I'm sorry, I missed you for a little bit. Could you repeat the question?
Tell me a little bit about Indeed in general. What kind of services does Indeed offer, and how great of a tool is it for someone who's looking for a job right now?
Well, and indeed, we have a very simple and singular mission, and our mission is to help people get jobs. You'll see it if you were to be able to come into one of our offices, you'd see it on the walls, you'd see it on T-shirts that people wear. But it's very much not just a fancy marketing slogan for us. It's very much our core mission. It starts with our CEO all the way on down through everyone in the business, and it's why we do what we do. We have constantly made the decision in the way that we've developed our products and the way that we've sold our products to put the job seeker first. We ask ourselves, is this going to help the job seeker? And if it is, we do it. If it's not, we don't. And so, from our very simple search interface that literally just asks you what and where in terms of a role that you might be looking for, to the Indeed resume product, which allows job seekers to highlight their skills and their experiences and get that in front of prospective employers. Really, everything that we do is designed to work on the job seeker's behalf. And to that end, we have more than 250 million unique job seekers that use Indeed services every month, and that's a number that's been growing consistently throughout the company's 15-year history. And we are very much working right now to innovate, to adapt to the current circumstances, so that we can continue to serve the job seeker as the dynamics of the workplace change.
Well, Scott, there's an arts and nightlife theme to today's show. With so many venues closed, performances canceled indefinitely, there's a lot of people around the Bay Area, people who work in the box offices, ushers, stage managers, all the way to the musicians, the dancers, the actors. They're suddenly left without jobs. And I noticed that Indeed has jobs that really span this wide range, including postings for dancers, musicians, and other folks in the arts. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one of the things that Indeed really tries to focus on is helping everyone everywhere get jobs. And there really isn't a single shape or form for work. There is your sort of typical 9-to-5, 40-hour-a-week corporate jobs. There are service industry jobs. There's gig work and side work, and there's certainly the entertainment industry. And I'm here based in Austin, Texas, and we like to call ourselves the live music capital of the world. And many of my friends are full-time working musicians that are in that same boat. And we've seen people work to get very creative, lots and lots of online shows, streaming shows, that people are doing, and some of the venues here in Austin have started to do shows in the venue, but with no audience, and streaming them online, and making some of them are free, some of them are ticketed, some of them provide tipping options online. And so payment platforms and PayPal and Venmo and those other things have become very essential services for these folks that are more into that sort of gig work part of the economy. It's actually been really interesting and uplifting to see these communities of folks that support the arts and support the artists come together to find ways to do that, in this economy. But there's no doubt that for those that work in the entertainment industry, this is perhaps a more challenging time than for many other segments of the economy.
I was speaking with someone else from Indeed earlier today, and she was telling me that, with tourism basically canceled, so many people in the hospitality industry, tourism industry, there's a great need, especially for work from home, customer service industry folks right now. Anybody who can maybe pivot from working in travel and tourism to working in customer service, huge uptick in those kinds of jobs. Are you seeing that as well?
We absolutely are. And you see that evidenced in both the job postings, particularly in the Bay Area, but we see this across all segments of the economy as well. And the job seeker searches, there's quite a bit for customer service representatives, for sales associates remotely, and that type of work. And the other thing I would say is that you talked about people pivoting, and we certainly are seeing it now as a time when people are looking for transferable skills, things that may have applied in one area of the economy when everything was fully opened up, but where there are applications, even in the sort of changed economy that we're in today. So I think for people looking for those transferable skills, those types of customer service and customer support, sales associates roles, and those types of things are opportunities that we are seeing very healthy activity in across the economy right now.
All right, Scott, last question. What's the biggest takeaway for you personally during this great pause? What has changed? What will forever change for you?
I think one of the things that has struck me is the deep interconnectedness that I think we all that has been true forever about our society, that I think people are starting to maybe take a little bit less for granted. The critical roles that are played every day, by our healthcare workers and the postal service and the delivery workers and food service, and that maybe we weren't as sensitive to, as we should have been in the past. And I think that this has really highlighted that. And looking for silver linings, I think we've, as a society, I think really become a little bit more awake to this. And, one of the things that I have just been extremely grateful for, in my time, over these last couple of months, and indeed, is just the amount of patience and grace that people have exhibited, whether it's in remote meetings with babies crying or dogs barking or people barging in or doorbells ringing, and the sort of good humor that everyone has brought to that, certainly in my experience, has been humbling. And I'm hoping that we can take a little bit more away from that, not just in our own little circles, but, as things return to a new normal here moving forward as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Such great words of wisdom, and such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much, Scott Bonneau, VP of Global Talent Attraction at Indeed.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Well, ahoy. Oh, sorry. Well, not a wardrobe malfunction, but I believe that the way we're going to get out of this great pause is making this a mandatory and stylish costume function. I keep hearing this debate about wearing masks or not wearing masks, and I really think it's going to become, in the coming months, a sign of respect, because this isn't about protecting me. This is about protecting other people. And I really think that humans are so creative. My grandmother, who you often hear me talk about, talked about the great pandemic of 1918. Okay. And she talked about having to wear a mask. She was a seamstress. She made masks for people. And I just wanted to, use that little visual cue to remind people that this is one of the ways we're going to get out of the great pause.
Oh, I love it so much. I was looking around here for my masks. I've been actually testing out a myriad of masks for my weekly column in USA Today, the Tech Life column in USA Today. I am dying to find a mask that I can wear while I run, because I sweat so much out on these runs that I feel like I'm waterboarding myself half the time. So I'm looking for something with a little bit of a beak so I can run and breathe. But I agree with you. So much fuss, like vitriolic anger and violence over being told to wear a mask, and I keep saying, well, do you argue that much about wearing a seatbelt? I mean, I'm not sure what the issue is, because it is such a small inconvenience compared to the continued havoc that this pandemic wreaks on our lives. I can't deal with any more of that conversation. I'm unfriending people like crazy on Facebook, and just, thank you, Grandma Margaret, for reminding us what's truly important. It's a very, very small inconvenience to try to get all of our lives back on track and to protect the health of so many people around us. So don't make it such a big deal. I have some ridiculous masks around here. I'm going to bring them out for next week. Some of them look more like, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, next week, believe it or not, is our farewell show, which is hard to believe. But, Cher had a bunch of quote unquote final shows. So who knows? But officially, next week is our last show. And we've got some really important guests, some newsworthy guests. Heather Knight, who has been doing an incredible job covering COVID-19 for the San Francisco Chronicle, will be on. Brian Goldstein from Energy Independence Now, talking about how the great pause might lead into a great sustainability. And we'll learn more about how we really can get past this period into the new normal. And I think it's going to include wearing fashionable masks. I really do.
I mean, you just look so good in that, David. I just can't believe how do you make everything fashionable? We'll also hear from famed author and historian Gary Kamiya, who takes us back in time and shows us how San Francisco managed to move on after the Great Flu pandemic of 1918. And of course, we will announce that Edge Desk winner. So if you haven't entered already, send those photos in. And David, any last words?
Well, you know that I'm going to end with what I always end with. We are getting through this. We will get through this, and keep on keeping on. And what was it Beyonce said? Put a ring on it. So I'm going to do that song and put a mask on it.
Well, I happen to have a little surprise for you, too. Did you see all those guitars that Scott, our last guest, had behind him? Well, surprise! In the spirit of arts and entertainment, I asked him to stick around and play some live closing music. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you back here next week. Good night. Play us a little song.
Play a little song.